All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Taryn Picard, and I am the sales manager here at Onset. We are going to present to you the water level logger deployment tips webinar today. And there I am, your host. To go over the webinar details, this webinar will run for approximately 40 minutes. We will save about 15 minutes to answer some of your questions at the end. However, feel free to type in your questions into the panel. You can see there is a question section. And if we don't get to answer your question today, please feel free to reach out to us, or we'll try to circle back with you within a reasonable time frame. This webinar is being recorded, and a link will be sent out to you via email afterwards. Your presenter today is Becky Fish. Becky is a sales rep for our water quality and water level monitoring applications. She specializes in assisting researchers, consultants, government agencies, universities who are dealing with a wide range of different applications. And I laugh when I say that because I am always amazed and surprised at the unique applications we have brought to us. As a quick company overview, Onset was founded back in 1981. We focus on manufacturing data loggers, and we are now recognized as a global leader in producing data loggers. We actually have a wide network of distributors who help us to get our loggers out there all over the world. And we really take pride in the fact that we are a lean manufacturing organization because we do manufacture the loggers right here in-house. There is everything from our sales all the way to our engineering crew right here in Bourne, Massachusetts. I'm going to take a moment now to step back and let Becky take it from there. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Taryn, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining today. I also want to note that we did capture some of the questions which were submitted prior to the webinar. I think that a good majority of these questions are going to be addressed during today's presentation, but anything that was not, we will be following up with you after the fact, and certainly contact information will be available at the end of the presentation so you can reach us directly as well. Just a kind of overview of the different topics that we will discuss during today's webinar. We'll talk a little bit about Onset water level loggers, as we do have a few different options in this area, as well as tips for successful water level logger deployment. That would include mounting methods, how to easily deploy in the field and retrieve the data, getting those loggers ready to go into the field, and other useful features that are available in the HOBOware software and other software applications that support the different loggers. We'll also leave time at the end for questions and answers, so we'll be able to address some of the questions you have then, and again, we'll follow up with anything we don't get to after the presentation. Just a quick poll question. We'd like to get an idea from the audience what data loggers you have been using to date. Taryn's going to actually run that poll now. If you could just submit your answers when you have a moment.
All right, Becky, we'll give it just one more moment here, but it looks like the vast majority of you joining us today are using our water level loggers.
Awesome.
And to share those results with you all, you can see 87% of you are using our water level loggers, and then the rest are using pretty much our water quality, and we do have a few in the other category, so that is very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, everyone, for that information. So again, as some of you may already know, we offer several different types of water level monitoring devices, and they range everywhere from our original U20 standalone USB offload data logger up to our newer remote monitoring system, which will monitor water levels and enable anywhere, anytime access to that data via the web, as well as configuration remotely anywhere, anytime via the web. First, we'll talk about those standalone data loggers. The original U20 series is available in stainless steel, for freshwater deployments, or titanium for salt and brackish water deployments. And those loggers range from $495 to $595 respectively. A few years ago, we launched the U20L data logger. Well, I should say series of data loggers, excuse me. The main differences between these two data loggers are that the U20L is housed in polypropylene, which is less expensive to manufacture, hence the lower price point. Other slight feature differences would be that the U20L is just a tad bit bigger in diameter. So if you have applications which require you to use the smallest possible stilling wells, the U20 is going to be your best bet. Other feature differences include slightly slower response time with the U20L for temperature measurements, and just like a 0.0 decimal of higher accuracy with the U20 data loggers. We do talk to some customers whose applications are considered to be research grade and they need the absolute highest possible accuracy. And in that case, they would want to go with the U20 series because it is going to give you the best possible accuracy of the two different standalone models. These are non-vented data loggers, so they do require a source of barometric pressure in order to derive that compensated water level measurement. They use an optical sensor and therefore require an optic USB interface. That is typically a data shuttle or a base station. The differences between those two devices is that the data shuttle, number one, is completely waterproof and it's actually submersible. So if you're offloading loggers and you want to be able to just take the loggers from their mount, connect them while they're still wet to the shuttle, offload and then relaunch and redeploy, you can do that with the data shuttle. The data shuttle also has onboard memory, so you're able to just use it alone in the field as a handheld device. There's no computer connection required for offload and relaunch. The base station is not waterproof, so you would want to dry off the loggers before connecting them. And also the base station does not have onboard memory. It requires a computer connection for both configuration and download. The differences in those prices are $249 for the data shuttle and $124 for the base station. While the base station certainly has its use case, I think most customers elect to use the data shuttle for the convenience and time savings features. Again, these loggers are very, very ruggedized. They both include a durable ceramic sensor, which can withstand being deployed in a frozen environment. And once again, I mentioned the waterproof shuttle for easily and reliable field offload. I want to make a note here. I've noticed actually just in recent months that there's been a little bit of confusion about the requirements for a data shuttle and the HOBOware Pro software. So it is correct that the data shuttle, if the data shuttle is being used instead of the base station, the HOBOware Pro software is required for that shuttle support. However, in any case, regardless of which communication device is being used with the U20 or the U20L, you will require the HOBOware Pro software because it includes that barometric pressure compensation data assistant, which is required to derive the water level measurements. This slide is going to represent some of our newer solutions in the field of water level monitoring. The first one being the Bluetooth water level data logger, which we released a couple of years ago. The MX2001 has been very well received in the marketplace. Certainly, it's not necessarily the best, most suitable solution for every application, but particularly for groundwater applications, wetlands, estuaries, projects like that. This is a really, really great device. The way it works is you have a pressure transducer connected via direct read cable to the data logger. The logger would be mounted out of the water at the top of a well. The logger component is where you have the Bluetooth communication chip. You also would have the user replaceable batteries stored there. And then the direct read cable is available in any length whatsoever. So you can have shallow groundwater wells. You can also deploy these off a dock into another deeper body of water. And you're able to get the data wirelessly to your mobile device within a 100-foot range. Other capabilities include wireless configuration from your mobile device. This logger is currently supported by the free HOBO mobile app on an iOS or Android mobile device. It is not yet supported by the app on laptops. However, our development team is researching that, and we're hoping to offer support for laptops using the app by the end of this year, early in 2020. The next most recent release is the remote water level monitoring system. And some of you may be familiar with our RX3000 remote monitoring system, which is commonly used for weather stations and basically environmental monitoring, whether it be agricultural, coastal environments, many other outdoor applications. What we've done is we've partnered with Stevens, who manufacture the SDX pressure transducer, so that the SDX is an item that we can also resell in conjunction with the RX3000 and all of the other necessary components to support the remote water level monitoring system. Those other components would include an analog module, because the SDX sensor has an analog output, and then of course the power, whether it be an AC adapter or a solar panel, and any other accessories you might need. And the system is also capable of supporting up to 15 additional HOBO smart sensors. We've seen a lot of applications where customers want to monitor water level remotely, but they also want to look at other factors like rainfall, barometric pressure, temperature, relative humidity, solar radiation, wind, or others like soil moisture. The RX3000 has the option of communicating data to the web, to our HOBOlink service cloud, by leveraging a cellular, Wi-Fi, or Ethernet network. So depending where the system is going to be deployed, cellular is usually the most common service for outdoor deployments. However, some folks that might be deploying this right near a farm or some other type of building and have access to Wi-Fi or Ethernet do choose to use one of those methods of communication if cellular service is not available in their area. The remote monitoring system has the ability also to issue real-time remote alarms. So if you set a threshold in the HOBOlink service cloud and there's an excursion for that water level, you can get a remote alarm notification sent to you real-time via text or email, or both. Now I'm going to move into tips for successful water level logger deployment, and the first subtopic under that is mounting methods. Quick poll before we jump into that. I'd like to get a sense of where you all plan to deploy your water level data loggers so we can get an idea of the types of applications you're involved in.
All right, Becky, and it looks like the vast majority of our folks joining us today are deploying these in streams or other. And we'll just give it a quick second here, and then we'll go ahead and close out those results.
Thank you again, everyone, for doing that poll. I'm not surprised at all that the most common application is for stream monitoring. I would say groundwater is probably the most common application we see for water level. However, we do see a lot of folks, again, monitoring in coastal environments, estuaries, other wetlands types of applications. So there's really a lot of different purposes for these measurements. Moving into mounting considerations. Couple of key guidelines when you're planning your deployment and how to mount the loggers. You want to make sure that the mount is done very carefully and accurately so you can get the highest accuracy of your water level data. A lot of folks know this already. By using the loggers, you want to plan ahead and make sure that you have time to explore other options in case you get to the site and realize there's a requirement for something you were not aware of previously. So it's always good to try and survey that location before you go out to actually deploy the loggers. Some general mounting considerations. You want to make sure the logger is not going to move during deployment. You want to try and mount that in as stable a position as possible. You also want to make sure to plan for easy access for when you go back to offload the data. I know that some of these monitoring sites are in very remote locations, so another reason why you want to plan in advance and make sure you're going to have easy access to go and offload and or service a logger if need be. And then you want to make sure that you are servicing and protecting the logger in a way that you're going to prevent as much fouling as possible. Fouling can be due to sediment, silt, other things in the water that could clog the sensor opening. So a lot of times users will put the loggers in like a slotted PVC pipe so that the water can get in and flow around the sensor, but it's going to deter a lot of the sediment or other materials in the water from getting in there and fouling the sensor. I wanted to include this illustration, and I realize it's such a basic one, but when I'm talking to customers about the MX2001, the newer Bluetooth water level logger, it's hard sometimes to visualize exactly how it would be mounted because it is comprised of a few different components, unlike the original U20 and U20L. This is a simple picture to show you an example of how the MX2001 would be mounted. You have a groundwater well, you have a well cap on the top of this PVC pipe, and the logger is secured into the well cap at the top of that well with a direct read cable connecting it to the transducer then being placed where there will be a presence of water. Another thing to note here, which is a common question I get, if there is a drought and there's no water present, the logger will continue to monitor air pressure. Again, these sensors are pressure transducers, so they're monitoring pressure. When they're in water, they monitor water pressure. When they're in air, they monitor barometric pressure. And you'll know if there's been a dry out and it's changed over to air pressure data because there'll be such a drastic change in that data set. These are some examples of common mounting methods. A lot of you are probably using the stilling well. And this shows you where there might be a logger, hanging up above the water to monitor that barometric pressure. If you're using the U20 or the U20L and you need that source of baro pressure, some folks will use another U20L or U20 for that baro reading, and some customers have a weather station nearby, or there's an airport within 10 miles where they can use the data from the airport's MET station. Any of those sources of baro pressure will work in the data assistant in the HOBOware Pro software. You just want to make sure you're getting that data from a source within 10 miles of where the water level loggers are deployed. Another example would be a post mount, where you have the logger literally zip tied to a post in the water. And also another way to keep the logger stable and keep it from being knocked around if there's any type of, tumultuous water, a lot of current, other things moving around the water that might knock into it, having it tied to or secured into some type of a concrete block or attached to a cinder block or something to help keep it in place is a very common method as well. Going to get into a little more detail about mounting in wells, some things you want to look out for. Stainless steel wire so that it's going to withstand the elements in water. You want to make sure it's wire that's not going to stretch or kink during the deployment. And if you have a Teflon coated stainless steel wire, that's going to be your best option. Again, Teflon coated wire is great for the cleaning process as well. You can get this suspension wire from us along with crimps if needed, and there's other suppliers which provide this as well, such as webrigingsupply.com. And do make sure that the well is vented to the atmosphere. This gets into more detail about building a stilling well for some of those newer users that may not have done this before. Again, these wells are most commonly built out of slotted or perforated PVC pipes, but some customers are using stainless steel or other types of metal pipes as well. And it's okay for the well to be sloped as long as the logger isn't going to get stuck and you have a way to take a reference water level reading. So keep in mind, this sensor is a pressure transducer. It doesn't matter if it's horizontal, vertical, diagonal, upside down, or sideways. It's monitoring pressure. You just want to make sure that it's securely mounted in place. These are some photographs that we thought would be helpful for visual reference of different stilling well examples. Everything from, as I mentioned earlier, mounting off a dock, mounting in between rocks in a stream, and then also off the side of a bridge over a creek, and this other apparatus along the river bank as well. If the bottom is soft enough, you can actually, of the water is soft enough, you can actually drive the PVC pipe directly into the ground to help keep it in place. And this also shows you a picture or a visual of what slotted PVC pipe looks like. Again, it's letting the water get in and flow around the sensor, but it's going to keep out most of the elements like silt and other, sediment and other things that are floating around in the water. Making sure that that pipe has holes or slots. And also some customers use screens or slotted PVC, as needed to keep the dirt and silt out, just sort of reiterating the same points here. This is another fairly common mounting method where you actually have the slotted PVC attached to rebar. So you want to make sure that you're jamming that rebar into the stream bed. You can drill holes for bolts into rocks. People get really, really creative. We have some users that will actually install camming devices or use camming devices in their installation for faster deployment. There's a lot of different, methods for doing this and some really tricks and tools out there to help in the process. These are some examples of mounting on a stake. And again, you could drive that stake right into the ground to help keep it stable. Getting into a little bit more close-ups of mounting on a stake, and some of the guidelines here are best practices for doing so. Metal fence posts are the most commonly used apparatus. You would attach the PVC pipe as a stilling well, and the one that you're looking at here is actually a prefab housing that we sell. So if you want something that's just already made and ready to go, we do offer this. You want to attach a loop to be able to pull the logger out and consider the cable to the logger as a safety strap. Then secure the logger into the housing with zip ties to keep it from moving around inside the housing so it's as stable as possible. Wrap PVC pipe and copper screen if you'd like to reduce fouling even more. Have a lot of users who do that, especially in saltwater or brackish water environments. These are some examples, guidelines you can use when you're mounting on a rock or a cement cinder block type of apparatus. These are less visible if you're worried about theft or vandalism or tampering with the instruments. You'll also be able to keep them weighted down to the ground of the stream or river or lake or pond, wherever you're mounting it, which would be out of the way of most boat traffic. And you can still find them if you use markers such as the ones we outline here. This is a photo actually from one of our customers with the Maine DEP. Oops, sorry about that. Again, another example of using the mounting on a cement block. Pile rocks around the cement block to help hold it in place. Examples of what it looks like if you mount the loggers on a rock. Mount the logger on a rock. It's a picture from Town Brook and Plymouth users. And this is going to show you, talk a little bit more about mounting a barometric pressure logger. So again, this only comes into play if you're using the U20 or U20L non-vented standalone data loggers. If you're using the MX 2001 Bluetooth logger, that is already vented design, so the data that you get is already going to be compensated for air pressure. And same with our remote monitoring system. You don't need a separate baro reading for those systems. In the case of the U20 or U20L, where you do need a baro logger or another source of barometric pressure, just showing you again some best practices for how and where to mount the baro logger. You want to, if possible, try to keep it out of the way of direct sunlight. The barometric pressure source should be within 10 miles of the loggers that are deployed in the water. And it's certainly easiest just to use the data from another U20 or U20L for the purpose of accuracy and consistency. But again, we do have customers that use data from weather stations, and it's perfectly fine. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about preparing the loggers for deployment. A few notes on accuracy and logger selection before we go there. A lot of vendors talk about typical accuracy and maximum error. But water level accuracy depends on a few different things. First of all, taking an accurate reference water level measurement, that's going to help compensate for logger placement and any sensor drift. You also want to try to get an accurate barometric data reading, as we talked about before, for the non-vented U20 and U20L loggers. And you want to try to ensure smoothing changing temperatures in the environment versus sudden changes or drastic changes in temperature. Raw pressure accuracy is another consideration, and this applies if you're not using a reference water level measurement. And the accuracy over temperature is important, especially for those applications with changing temperatures, such as a lot of the surface water applications. You want to look for loggers with good temperature compensation for these applications, which ours tend to have. Now preparing the loggers for deployment. You want to check that the logger software is up to date. So if you're using the U20 or U20L, both of which are supported by the HOBOware Pro software, you install the HOBOware Pro, you should have the latest version if you're just purchasing from it or you're downloading maybe the 30-day trial from our website. And once you install the license key, you'll have a full permanent license. If you have the software installed and you haven't accessed it in a while and you're going to be doing a new deployment, when you log into the software again, you should be prompted if there has been an update released since then, and you will follow the prompts to access a link that will let you download the latest update to make sure you have the most current version of the software. And that's a free update as well. You want to make sure that the clock on your computer is set to the correct time zone and that the time is accurate. And then we'll get into a little bit more detail about launching the loggers on the next slide. If you're using the HOBO waterproof shuttle, you want to make sure that the batteries are less than 1 year old, that it has the latest firmware update, that it has been launched, and that the clock is synchronized to the computer clock. I just want to jump back for 1 second here when I talked about the HOBOware Pro software for the U20 and the U20L. The HOBO mobile app, which supports the MX2001 Bluetooth logger, will also have the same feature where you'll be notified of any new updates that have been released or bug fixes or firmware updates each time you log in, and you'll be given the opportunity to go out and download those updates for free. If you're deploying in saltwater where you're not sure what the salinity is, you will want to use a conductivity or salinity meter to get a reading and make sure you're going to get the best accuracy. So you just take a meter into the field or bring a sealable jar to bring a water sample back, and then you can insert the meter to test that. A lot of you probably have our conductivity data logger, the U24 series logger. So if you do, you can certainly use that as well. Preparing the loggers for deployment. So in terms of launching the loggers, again, you want to check the battery status when you have it connected to the HOBOware Pro software or wirelessly with the HOBO mobile app, or when you're logged into HOBOlink for the remote monitoring system. You always want to log the temperature as well as the pressure because, again, this is required for the temperature compensation. That's just a screenshot of what the screen in the HOBOware Pro looks like. When you're launching multiple loggers for the same deployment, you can set your preferences to use previous launch to fill launch window. This also will help ensure that the loggers all have the same logging rate and start time for consistent data. Talk a little bit now about field deployment and data retrieval. At the beginning of the deployment, you want to be careful if you're lowering the logger into the water to avoid sensor shock. So again, just take caution and do things slowly. Again, always take a reference level measurement at the beginning of a deployment whenever possible. And for the best accuracy, give it 10 minutes or so for the logger to reach temperature stabilization before you take that first reference measurement. And then you may want to take a second measurement just to double check. Be sure to record the date and time along with the reference measurement when you record that. If you're deploying in saltwater where you don't know the level of salinity, again, take a meter or bring the water back in a jar and test it back at your home or office. And at the end of each deployment period, you want to take a reference measurement again before offloading the logger as a backup and to check for any drift that may have occurred during deployment. You also want to be sure when you go to offload data that you check the logger for signs of fouling, especially in the area where the sensor is located, and you want to make sure you clean that as necessary just to make sure that you're getting optimal performance ongoing and that you're going to continue to get the most accurate possible data. A little bit about using the Barometric Compensation Assistant. Again, I know this is very redundant, but this only applies to the U20 and U20Ls. This is not required for the MX2001 Bluetooth logger or the remote water level monitoring system. This just shows you some screenshots from the Barometric Compensation Data Assistant in the HOBOware Pro software. It literally provides all the fields you need, and all you need to do is select a couple of boxes and enter the data from the respective water level and baro loggers in the respective fields. Check the logger has reached temperature stability. Again, I think we just want to reiterate this as much as possible as it is important for the best possible accuracy. You want to run the data once with the starting reference measurement, once with the ending reference measurement, and compare the two resulting data series. If there is a difference, this could indicate some drift, which is unlikely, or it could just be that one of the reference measurements was a little bit off, which is typically more likely. Here's another screen from the HOBOware Pro. Now we're looking at the actual graph for the reference water level measurement, making sure the logger has reached that temperature stability. And just as we sort of culminate the presentation, I want to talk a little bit about other useful features in the HOBOware Pro software. You can save a project. So this is an option that you would select if you want to save the water level data after you've done the conversion and barometric pressure compensation. You can also crop a series, and you can do this if you want to remove any data from before or after the deployment, which may not be relevant. You also can select which channels and also access that with access this feature with a right click on the graph. You'll get a drop down to select the option from. You can also merge project files. This is very simple, very intuitive from the file menu. So that's it for the presentation, and I'd like to maybe get in now to a little bit of Q&A. It looks like we do have some time left, maybe about 10 minutes or so, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, Becky. Well, we do have a lot of questions here. All right, one of the questions here is on saltwater maintenance and service life of the equipment. If you want to talk a little bit about that, I know it does really depend on the application and what type of environment you're specifically working in. But if you can give a general answer to that question, that'd be great.
Yep, absolutely. Taryn's right. It really is application dependent. But we usually, what I always tell my customers is in the beginning of any deployment, but especially in a saltwater deployment or if there's a brackish environment, that you really try and get out to visit the loggers once or twice within the first few weeks of deployment, just to make sure, number one, that if you connect the data shuttle, it's reading properly and the logger is definitely recording data. And then also two, just so you can gauge whether there seems to be any extreme degree of fouling. And from there, you can space out your visits. And, you know, we have customers that have loggers deployed in freshwater environments and they don't go out to check the loggers or offload data for 6 months at a time. Some customers have left them out even a little bit longer, and some customers need to go a little more frequently depending on the level of salinity or other factors in the environment. Cleaning them off gently and just using care in doing so is recommended. We give some specific tips for doing that in our resources section of the website as well. And if you need more specific information, I can certainly follow up with each of you individually.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky. And I will just mention, again, Becky kind of touched on it in the knowledge base section of our website. There are actually a lot of answers to the questions we're seeing here today. I will try to send some of you links because I see there are several questions on what we recommend as far as cleaning the sensors and data loggers. It really depends on which logger you're using. So we'll try to send you a link to some additional information specifically on that. Another couple of good questions, and I'm going to combine some of your questions here, is when using the standalone loggers and specifically using something like a stilling well to deploy them, what is the smallest size pipe diameter we would recommend?
You definitely want to make sure that you have enough space inside the stilling well for the water to flow around the sensor. So the U20 is just under an inch in diameter, and the U20L is just over an inch in diameter. As a standard best practice, we recommend a 2-inch diameter stilling well at least whenever possible. That's actually the size of our prefabbed housings as well. And again, 2 inches or more is going to allow plenty of water to flow around the sensor. We do have some customers that are using even smaller stilling wells, maybe 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 inches. In those cases, they use the U20 because it is about maybe, I think, around a 1/2 inch smaller in diameter than the U20L. And that's going to, again, give the most optimal space for water to flow around the sensor inside that stilling well.
Great, thank you. And Becky, we have a couple of questions about if loggers can be used together. So for example, can you use the MX2001 with the RX3000 station?
Good question, definitely. So currently the MX2001 is primarily and initially supported by the HOBO mobile app on your mobile device. So the way it would work today, you would have HOBO mobile installed on your iOS or Android mobile device. You would visit the site and be within 100 feet of the logger in order to get that data communicated wirelessly to the app. However, we've sort of taken the first step toward integration and having some type of direct push to the web by implementing a free service or a free option in the HOBO mobile software, where you can easily you can configure the app so that you can easily, with a 1 or 2 finger touch, push the data to the HOBO Link Service Cloud once it's hit the app. So today, as it works, you would have to have it hit the app first. So you'd have to visit the site and be within 100 feet. And then once it hits the app, you can push it out to the HOBO Link Service Cloud. And that gives you, as well as other users, or I should say other interested parties, the ability to access that data anywhere, anytime via the web once it's in HOBO Link, so they can conduct any post-processing of the data or further analysis, as well as export if they want to. The other option, which is available in HOBO Mobile, just as it's also available in HOBOware Pro and HOBO Link, are the export capabilities. You can export to a .csv or a .xls file. You can also push data to FTP, and there's many different options for that in terms of data sharing and integration.
So here at Onset, we are obviously experts in data logging. However, with all of the customers we speak with on a daily basis, we definitely begin to build a knowledge base of what types of recommendations we would make when getting into the deployment side. A couple of the questions here could probably be answered by explaining how we've had some customers run into the issues with the MX1101's flooding and how important it is for the stilling wells to be mounted at a level where they can't be flooded. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. So the MX2001, again, is a Bluetooth water level logger. We did have some customers who ordered these loggers sort of in the early days of the product's release and didn't really take into account the potential for a flood event. And therefore, when they deploy the loggers, they may have ordered, a 2 or 3 meter cable length. And when they mounted the logger at the top of a well, weren't aware that a flood event could easily have the water go over the top of that well and that logger. And now when the logger is submerged underwater for a long period of time, depending how long it's submerged, it may recover and it may still operate, but the chances are that you're going to see over time some issues with data accuracy, resolution, as well as performance of the overall instrument. The top end portion, which is the logger, which is where the user replaceable batteries are stored and that Bluetooth communication is housed, that is not waterproof. It's weatherproof, and it is designed to withstand the elements. So it can be rained on, it can be splashed on, and it can even withstand some brief intermittent submersions, but it is not designed to be fully submerged. So you do want to take into account if you are deploying these in wetlands or even a coastal environment, you want to keep in mind if that area is subject to any extreme storm activity where floods are common after a heavy rainfall or a storm event, you may want to account for a couple of extra meters on that direct read cable so that you're able to, and then maybe install like a post into the ground or into the bed of whatever body of water you're monitoring to make sure that that logger top end component is mounted well above where the water level might be in a flood event.
Thank you, Becky. And some of the feedback from our customers who are still using the standalone loggers, but placing the barometric pressure logger in that stilling well as well. They're saying, of course, we have to remember not only for the flood events, because those loggers can obviously withstand being placed underwater, but they'll be getting the incorrect measurements because they're no longer measuring in air. So absolutely thank you for that feedback as well.
Very good point.
So lots of questions have come in about the data and how you can launch your loggers. I do want to refer a lot of you to our technical support team if you need assistance right away answering some of those questions or just using the HOBOware software in general. We do have a very large staff of technical support people here who can help you with setting up, launching, and deploying your loggers. So we want to make sure that you get the best information you need to work for your specific application. But in general, Becky, if you could do a little bit of talking about the different platforms we have. I know you went over it at a high level, but if you could just talk about some of the features between using something like HOBOlink, where you have dashboard configuration, versus using something like the HOBO mobile app and HOBOware.
Absolutely. So just to recap, the standalone non-vented loggers, the U20 and U20L series, are supported by the HOBOware Pro software, and that's where you will utilize the barometric pressure compensation data assistant to get your derived water level data. The HOBOware Pro software gives you a ton of different graphing and analysis capabilities, as well as export capabilities to make it really easy to share and do some post-processing of data outside of the software platform. Then the HOBO mobile app is the Bluetooth app, which supports the MX2001. That app enables wireless configuration of the data loggers from HOBO Mobile, as well as wireless readout of the data loggers. Typically, the Bluetooth communication works within a 100-foot range line of sight. So keep in mind if there are any obstructions between where the logger is mounted and where you are with your mobile device, you may have to get a little bit closer than that 100-foot range. But that app allows for a lot of flexibility. I mentioned earlier how you can do a quick and easy data push to the HOBOlink cloud once that data has hit the app. You can also export from the app not only in .csv or .xls format, but also as a HOBOware format. So if you have a mix of U20s, U20Ls, and MX2001s, you can email yourself a HOBOware file format from the app, open up that MX2001 data in the HOBOware software where you're already analyzing your U20 or U20L data, and then overlap the data from the different loggers and analyze those data from all those different loggers together. The HOBOlink Service Cloud is the application which supports the remote monitoring system, and this offers a ton of flexibility and convenience. Again, I mentioned remote alarm notifications being one of the features of HOBOlink. You also have the option to schedule data delivery in HOBOlink, which is a feature where you can schedule a file a summary of data to be emailed to you and or any number of users on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, however you want to configure that scheduled data delivery to go out. You can also use data delivery to send data to an FTP so that users can access it on a common server on their network. And again, a lot of, in addition to that, we have a lot of other features that can be exercised using APIs for integration with other applications and programs and doing data pushes to different programs as well from the HOBOlink data cloud.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Becky. And again, I'm just going to point out that on our website, if you go to support, underneath support, you're going to find the knowledge base. And within the knowledge base, there is just a bunch of information that's going to answer a lot of the questions we saw come through today. So again, if you're still looking for an answer, please try checking out the knowledge base on our website, or give our technical support team a call, or even give us a call on the sales team. We're more than happy to help answer any questions you may have. Here is our contact information. Also want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded, and we will send you an email with a link to the recording. So if there's anything you missed, or if you want to share this webinar with all of your friends because you thought it was so exciting, please feel free to do so. Thank you again for your time, and we really appreciate you taking this time with us today to learn more about the HOBO data loggers.
Thank you very much, everyone. And please don't hesitate to call the toll-free number. You can ask for me directly if you'd like to speak further about a particular question you have, or feel free to email me directly at the email address located here. And thank you again for your time today.